السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. وأغرب ابن حبان فادعى الاتفاق على قبول غير الداعية من غير تفصيل. نعم، الأكثر على قبول غير الداعية إلا أن يروي ما يقوي بدعته فيرد على المذهب المختار. وبه صرح الحافظ أبو إسحاق إبراهيم بن يعقوب الجوزجاني شيخ أبي داود والنسائي في كتابه معرفة الرجال، وقال في وصف الرواة: ومنهم زائغ عن الحق أي عن السنة الصادق اللهجة، فليس فيه حيلة إلا أن يؤخذ من حديثه ما لا يكون منكرا إذا لم يقوي به بدعته. وما قاله متجه لأن العلة التي لها رد حديث الداعية واردة فيما إذا كان ظاهر المروي يوافق مذهب المبتدع ولو لم يكن داعية، والله أعلم. We discussed the two types of innovators and mentioned the various rulings under each type. So the view with which we concluded the last lesson was that the narration of an innovator whose innovation is mild and does not lead to kufr, such a person's narrations will be accepted as long as he does not propagate his views. Allama Khatib rahimahullah attributed this view to many scholars, and Allama Ibn Salah rahimahullah mentioned that it was the view of the majority. So this is also the view of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. Allama Khatib rahimahullah narrated with his chain, which links to Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, that he said, سأل أبو عصمة أبا حنيفة ممن تأمرني أن أسمع الآثار. That Abu Isma asked Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, that from who do you command me that I should hear a hadith from? So Abu Hanifa rahimahullah responded and said, من كل عدل في هواه إلا الشيعة. He said that any person who is honest, but not from a Shia. So when the way he mentions it until year makes it seem that this year is his Lord, his view, just like Imam Malik rahimahullah, that he does not regard it at all as permissible to narrate from a Shia. And therefore, as we'll explain later, there were many Hanafis who took that view, and they said that if a person is astray, then you cannot narrate at all from them. But nevertheless, we continue with his statement, and you'll see what he mentions at the end. So he says, فَإِنَّ أَصْلَ عَقَدِهِمْ تَضَلِيلُ أَصْحَابِ مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. Because the very basis of their belief is to regard the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as astray. وَمَنْ أَتَى السُّلْطَانَ طَائِعًا. The second person from who you cannot narrate from is a person who goes to a leader and maintains good relationships with the kings. أما أني لا أقول أنهم يكذبون أو يأمرونهم بما لا ينبغي. He said, notice that I'm not saying that these people are lying. I'm not saying that these kings are going to command them to do that's what's wrong. ولكن وطأوا لهم حتى انقادت العامة بهم. He said, but they made it such, they showered them with so much gifts and they give them so much royalty that it is inevitable that they will just succumb to the leaders. فَهَذَانِ لَا يَنْبَغِي أَن يَكُونَا مِنْ أَئِمَّةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. He says these two groups of people, they cannot be considered as leaders. Now he says, وَأَمَّا مَنْ تَرَكَ الدُّعَاء مِنْ أَهْلِ الْبِدْعِ أَيُّرْوَى عَنْهُمْ. So he's saying that those people who do not propagate, it will be permissible to narrate from them. وَرَوَى عَمَّنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ دَاعِيَةً وَأَفْتَى بِذَلِكَ. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah himself practically also narrated from those who did not propagate, and he also gave the same fatwa. So therefore you will give then the second group of Hanafis who then put this condition. So in spite of the huge amount of scholars who held this view, we cannot attribute it to all scholars, because it's the view of Jumhur. There's no ittifaq. There is a big difference between ittifaq and Jumhur. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah now refutes those who claimed that there is ittifaq. So he mentions with regards to Ibn Hibban, that وَأَغْرَبُ ابْنُ حِبَّانَ فَادَّعَ الْإِتِّفَاقَ عَلَى قَبُولِ غَيْرِ الدَّاعِيَةِ مِنْ غَيْرِ تَفْصِيلٍ. He's saying that Ibn Hibban came up with something which is very strange, and he claimed there's ittifaq, that you can just accept the narration of someone who does not propagate his views and it not create any distinction. Now this min ghayri tafsil, there's different ways you can interpret it. If you look in the footnotes, Sheikh Nuruddin he interprets it أي تفريق بين أن يكون ظاهر المروي موافقا بدعته أو لا. It's the one way. Other commentators will say min ghayri tafsil, meaning that whether it's mukaffir or mufassiq, whatever. But basically, Ibn Hibban rahimahullah just mentioned it in a very broad sense. He did not put any clauses. He did not put any other restrictions. Now, why Ibn Hajar rahimahullah brings this here is because Alama Ibn Salah rahimahullah mentioned it in his muqaddimah. They said in his muqaddimah that وقال أبو حاتم بن حبان البستي أحد المصنفين من أئمة الحديث الداعية إلى البدع لا يجوز الاحتجاج به عند أئمتنا قاطبة لا أعلم بينهم فيه خلافا. So this is what Alama Ibn Hibban mentions in his Majruhin. He said الداعية إلى البدع لا يجوز يحتج به عند أئمتنا قاطبة لا أعلم بينهم فيه خلافا. But in the statement of Alama Ibn Hibban, he's just mentioning that لا أعلم بينهم فيه خلافا. He's saying that he does not know of any differences. So that means there could be differences. He's talking on his knowledge. Maybe others could know about the differences. Maybe in his research he could not find any differences. So this is not very clear to say, to indicate that he is attributing it to all scholars. And therefore, Allama Sakhawi rahmallah, we discussed all of this when we were doing the lesson of Muqaddamah ibn Salah. He said, وَلَيْسَ صَرِيحًا فِي الْإِتِّفَاقِ لَا مُطْلَقًا وَلَا بِخُصُوصِ الشَّافِعِيَّةِ. He's saying that here, the statement of Allama ibn Hibban, it doesn't show at all that he mentioned that there's consensus, nor is he even restricting it to consensus amongst Shafi'is. But there is another very clear statement of Ibn Hibban rahimahullah, which Ibn Salah rahimahullah could have quoted. So in his thiqat, Allama Ibn Hibban rahimahullah, he said, ليس بين أهل الحديث من أئمتنا خلاف أن الصدوق المتقن إذا كان فيه بدعة ولم يكن يدعو إليها أن الاحتجاج بأخباره جائز. فإذا دعا إلى بدعته سقط الاحتجاج بأخباره. So this here is very clear, very emphatic. That here he's saying ليس بين, so he's making the claim. He's not saying that he doesn't know. He's making the claim and he's saying that there is no differences amongst all our imams. That as long as a person is reliable and he's competent enough, if he does not propagate his views, then you can accept hadith from him. But once he starts to propagate his views, فَإِذَا دَعَا إِلَى بِدْعَتِهِ سَقَطَ الْإِحْتِجَاجُ بِأَخْبَارِهِ. Then it is now no more correct to narrate from him. So this is what Allama Ibn Hibban mentioned, and therefore Allama Ibn Hajar rahmallah refutes this here. Now he clarifies that you can just put a few conditions, then it would become acceptable and you could then attribute it to all. So he says, نعم الأكثر على قبول غير الداعية إلا أن يروي ما يقوي بدعته فيرد على المذهب المختار. So you can see now he's putting a different clause. So the first clause which is already there is that the person does not propagate his views. Now Ibn Hajar is putting in an additional clause and he's saying that the person does not narrate a hadith which strengthen his bid'ah. So it could happen that the innovator does not propagate his bid'ah, but he quotes a hadith which support and which strengthens his bid'ah. So this here is now Ibn Hajar is putting the second clause. So there are two clauses, then you can accept, then you think you can attribute it to the majority. The first is that the person should not propagate his views. And the second is that he should not narrate something which strengthens, or instead of using the word yaqawi also, you can just say which is in conformity. Because when he's mentioning, if it's in conformity, it is bid'ah, it means it strengthens his bid'ah. So he shouldn't mention something which supports or is in conformity with his views. So Allama Sakhawi rahmallah, he elaborated on the text here, these words of Ibn Hajar, and he said, وَلَكِنْ يَشْتَرِطُ مَعَ هَذَيْنِ أَعْنِي كَوْنَهُ صَادِقًا غَيْرَ دَاعِيَةٍ. He's saying that you put the first condition that he must be truthful. By saying that he must be truthful, all that whole thing about taqiyya and all that falls away. That's the first condition. غَيْرَ دَاعِيَةٍ. The second is that he should not propagate his views. And then the third is ألا يكون الحديث الذي يحدث به مما يعذر that the narration which he is narrating should not be such that it strengthens his bid'ah ويشدها ويزينها, or that it supports it, or that it even beautifies it. فإنا لا نأمن حينئذ عليه غلبة الهوى. And then he says, أفاده شيخنا, that Ibn Hajar rahmallah told us to ask. So this is the additional condition which Ibn Hajar rahmallah is placing. Ibn Hajar rahmallah now explains his source from where he gets this clause. So he says, وبه صرح الحافظ أبو إسحاق إبراهيم بن يعقوب الجوزجاني شيخ أبي داود والنسائي في كتابهم معرفة الرجال. He says that Abu Ishaq Ibrahim ibn Yaqub al-Juzajani. So this is how it's read, with the fatha on the za and with a dhamma on the jim, Juzajani. So basically this here is Ibrahim ibn Ishaq al-Juzajani. He was born in 180 and he passed away in the year 259. So from there you can get an idea that he was older than Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, and he also lived longer than Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. But he was in that time, so he was a student of the elite scholars of that time, the likes of Yahya ibn Ma'in and Ali ibn al-Madini, Ishaq ibn Rahuya, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. And he grew up to become a great scholar in the science of Jarh wa Ta'dil. So being a scholar in the science of Jarh and Ta'dil is a great accomplishment, because we explained this before, that the person has to be a genius. Then only he can comment and he can pass grades on narrators. So that way his teachers, his students include Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi. So yeah, although Ibn Hajar rahmallah only takes the name of Imam Abu Dawud and Imam Nasa'i, but Imam Tirmidhi was also his student. Likewise Abu Hatim al-Razi, Abu Zur'a al-Razi. So all of these great scholars, they were his students. And he authored various books. One of the books which he authored is on the Masail of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. He also authored a book on Tariq, and he authored this book here on Jarh and Ta'dil. Yes, there was some rivalry between him and Imam Muslim rahimahullah, and likewise there was some rivalry between him and the Kufans. So when the time is right, inshallah, then you will read the details on the dispute between him and Imam Muslim rahimahullah and the enmity, etc. But we cannot deny that he was a great scholar. So it was because they were contemporaries. So he mentions this here in the kitab Ma'rifatul Rijal. So this book is printed, but it's printed with the name Ahwalul Rijal. So although Ibn Hajar is saying Ma'rifatul Rijal, it's printed with the name Ahwalul Rijal. If you're interested, you can go and make tahqiq, which a name is more correct. So he mentioned in that. So while explaining narrators, he said, وَمِنْهُمْ زَائِغٌ عَنِ الْحَقِّ, that there are those who are astray from the truth. That means from the sunnah. صَادِقُ اللَّهْجَ, but they are very truthful, they will not lie. فَلَيْسَ فِيهِ حِيلَةٌ, so there is nothing we can do إِلَّا يُؤْخَذَ مِنْ حَدِيثِهِ, except that we accept his narrations مَا لَا يَكُونُ مُنْكَرًا, as long as those narrations are not munkar, إِذَا لَمْ يُقَوِّ بِهِ بِدْعَتَهُ, and they do not strengthen his bid'ah. So now you can understand from the statement, Alama Qasim rahmallah explains it, and he said that look at the statement here, he's not mentioning anything about not propagating. So he says, Alama Qasim mentions in Al-Qawl al-Mubtakar, وَظَاهِرُ هَذَا قَبُولِ رِوَايَةِ الْمُبْتَدِعِ إِذَا كَانَ وَرَعًا فِي مَا عَدَى الْبِدْعَةِ. That basically what the meaning of the statement is, that if a person is a mubtadi', then you can accept all narrations from him except those which conform with his bid'ah. And the only condition is that he must be truthful and he should memorize what he knew. So he's saying, سواء كان داعية أو غير داعية إلا فيما يتعلق ببدعته. That you can accept all narrations from him. The only narrations which you cannot accept from him are those narrations which support and which conform with his bid'ah. But there is no, he is not creating any separation or any distinction between a da'iyah and a ghair da'iyah. So the only clause that is made is that we cannot narrate anything that supports or conforms with his bid'ah. Besides that, there are no other clauses, there are no other principles, there are no other exceptions, there are no other restrictions, and there are no other conditions. So like you said, that this book of Alama Juzjani is printed with the name Ahwal al-Rijal. So now to see the exact words of his, we go and we find on page 32, this is what he said. He said, وَمِنْهُمْ زَائِغٌ عَنِ الْحَقِّ صُدُوقُ اللَّهْجَةِ قَدْ جَرَى فِي النَّاسِ حَدِيثَهُ إِذَا كَانَ مَخْذُولًا فِي بِدْعَتِهِ مَأْمُونًا فِي رِوَايَتِهَا فَهَؤُلَاءِ لَيْسَ فِيهِمْ حِيلَةٌ إِلَّا أَن يُؤْخَذَ مِنْ حَدِيثِهِمْ مَا يُعْرَفُ إِذَا لَمْ يُقَوِّ بِهِ بِدْعَتَهُ. So this is how he mentions it there. So he does not place the condition of propagating. He only places the condition that the person should not narrate something which supports or which strengthens his bid'ah. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, now he remarks on this and he says, وَمَا قَالَهُ مُتَّجِهْ. What he's saying actually, he has a point here. Why? So Al-Qurani explains what Ibn Hajar means and he says, وَمَا قَالَهُ مُتَّجِهْ. He says, وَمَا قَالَهُ الْجَوْزَانِي من عدم تقييد الرد بكون المبتدع داعية متوجهة. So this is how he explained it. But the focus is rather on the point which he is making. So it's not on this here. It is on the point which he is making. That is what is taken into consideration. Now what he mentions the reason and he says, لأن العلة التي لها رد حديث الداعية واردة فيما إذا كان ظاهر المروي يوافق مذهب المبتدع ولو لم يكن داعية والله أعلم. He's saying that the very reason that we're rejecting the narration of the one who propagates, that very reason features here. That what's the reason that we are not accepting the narration of a da'iyah? It is because it's possible that it could lead him to also fabricating a hadith. So in the same way, if the person is to narrate something which supports his bid'ah, even though he does not propagate, so he does not propagate, he is now narrating something which supports his bid'ah, that exact same thing could apply, that maybe it will lead him to fabricate. So Ibn Hajar is saying that لأن العلة التي رد حديث الداعية, that very same reason which causes the narration of a propagator to be rejected, وارد, it features فيما إذا كان ظاهر المروي, if the apparent of the narration يوافق مذهب المبتدع, if it confirms what the madhab of the mubtadi' ولو لم يكن داعية, even though he does not propagate. So لأن العلة المذكورة مشتركة بين الداعية وغير الداعية. So even though Allama Jawzjani only instituted this one condition and did not put the condition of not propagating, Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentions that we could include this condition. So that is how now we are getting two conditions. And if you want to make sidq as a separate condition, then you can say we have three conditions. So three conditions and you can accept the narration of a mubtadi'. This is the view of Ibn Hajar rahmallah. And he must be sadiq, he must be someone who is truthful, he must not propagate his views, and the narration which he narrates should not support and strengthen his views. And therefore you find that when he is to mention the rulings in Lisan al-Mizan, he mentioned it as follows, and he said, وَأَمَّا التَّفْصِيلِ وَهُوَ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِ أَكْثَرُ أَهْلِ الْحَدِيثِ بل نقل فيه ابن حبان إجماعهم ووجه ذلك أن المبتدع إذا كان داعية كان عنده باعث على رواية ما يشير به بدعته. And thereafter on the next page he said, ينبغي أن يقيد قولنا بقبول رواية المبتدع. It is necessary that we add this additional clause that when narrating from a mubtadi' إذا كان صدوقا, if he is honest, ولو لم, so it was the first condition, ولو لم يكن داعية, and if he does not propagate his views, بشرط ألا يكون الحديث الذي يحدث به مما يعذر بدعته ويشيدها. He's saying that this is the additional clause which will add that the person should not narrate something which strengthens his bid'ah. So this here is the view which Ibn Hajar rahmallah chose. However, even then we find that there are exceptions for this here. So for example, there is a narrator by the name of Adi ibn Thabit. So Adi ibn Thabit, he's a narrator who all the Imams of the Sahih Sittah, Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, Imam Nasa'i, Imam Abu Dawud, Imam Tirmidhi, and Imam Ibn Majah, all of them narrated from him. And Imam Bukhari narrated from him at numerous places. But with regards to him, Ibn Abi Hatim rahimahullah said that Saduq, okay, he was Saduq, so yeah, the meaning of Saduq is not the technical meaning. وَكَانَ إِمَامَ مَسْجِدِ الشِّيعَةِ, he was the Imam of the Masjid of the Shi'as. وَقَاتْلِهِمْ, and he would be the one who would deliver lectures. So Ibn Ma'in rahmallah mentions that Shi'iyun mufratun, that he is a very strong Shia and he goes to extremes. Likewise, Imam Al-Qutni rahmallah was asked with regards to this person, Adi ibn Thabit. So he said, ثِقَ إِلَّا أَيَّكُنَ غَالِيًا, that yes, he is thiqa, no doubt about that, but he goes to extremes. And yet Imam Muslim rahmallah narrates from him, and Imam Bukhari rahmallah narrated from him. But the point is that Imam Muslim rahmallah also narrated from him a narration which clearly supports his bid'ah. So that means it contradicts the principle Ibn Hajar rahmallah is trying to invent here. So when you go to Sahih Muslim, you find the sanad reaches up to Adi ibn Thabit an Zarrin قال علي والذي فلق الحبة وبرأ النسمة إنه لعهد النبي الأمي صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى لا يحبني إلا مؤمن ولا يبغضني إلا منافق. The rest narration comes in Sahih Muslim that taking an oath by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this year is the covenant which Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has left with regards to Ali radiallahu an, that no one will love Ali radiallahu an besides a mu'min. Now a Shia is narrating this Adi ibn Thabit, who was ghali fi tashayyu' and was Shi'iyun mufrat. So such a Shia is narrating this here. Clearly it supports the beliefs of the Shia. Yet Imam Muslim rahmallah narrated it. So that clearly contradicts what Ibn Hajar rahmallah tried to institute here. When we go to the introduction of Sahih Muslim, we find that Imam Muslim rahmallah only placed the condition of inad. So he said, وَعْلَمْ وَفَّقَكَ اللَّهِ أَنَّ الْوَاجِبَ عَلَى كُلِّ أَحَدٍ عُرِفَ التَّمْيِيزُ بَيْنَ السَّحَةِ. He's saying that I know very well, may Allah Ta'ala grant you tawfiq, that it's compulsory upon every scholar who knows how to differentiate between sahih and weak narrations, and he knows how to differentiate between those who are reliable and those who are accused. He's saying that أَلَّا يَرْوِي مِنْهَا إِلَّا مَا عَرَفَ صِحَّةَ مَخَارِجِهِ. He's saying that he should not narrate except those narrations which he knows for sure are suitable to narrate. وَاسْتَطَارَ فِي نَاقِلِهِ, and where the narrators have passed all the conditions. So that's compulsory upon him to do. What else is compulsory upon him? وَأَن يَتَّقِيَ مِنْهَا مَا كَانَ عَنْ أَهْلِ التُّهَمِ وَالْمُعَانِدِينَ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْبِدَعَةِ. So he's saying that he should save himself from the narrations of those who are doubtful, or from those who are stubborn from the innovators. So here when he talks about being stubborn from the innovators, so this here means that the person, because innovation means that there's no hadith, there's nothing to back it up. So the person is clearly told that, look, where's your proof? You're coming up, you're refuting this, you're holding this belief, where's your proof? And he cannot present any proof. Then a contrary proof is shown to him, and yet he does not make ruju', then that's called a mu'anid. But we find with regards to Adi ibn Thabit that he was a stone Shi'i, but he was level-headed. And therefore Imam Zahabi rahmallah said, وَلَوْ كَانَتِ الشِّيعَةُ مِثْلَهُ لَقَلَّ شَرُّهُمْ. If only all the Shi'as could be like him, then there wouldn't have been so much evil from the Shi'as. So Imam Bukhari rahmallah actually narrates a hadith from him. Imagine we're saying that he's a ghalib al-tashayyu', that he's a stone Shi'i. Yet Imam Bukhari is narrating from him a hadith in which he is praising the Ansar. So can you imagine? He's praising the Ansar, the hadith of praising the Ansar. So Imam Bukhari rahmallah said, حدثنا حجاج بن منهال قال حدثنا شعبة قال أخبرني عدي بن ثابت. So Shu'bah is narrating from Adi ibn Thabit. That's already a very a point to note from, that you know was Shu'bah. And he's narrating from Adi ibn Thabit قال سمعت البراء رضي الله عنه قال سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال. Or you know in Bukhari how it comes that سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, or it comes that قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So it comes الأنصار لا يحبهم إلا مؤمن ولا يبغضهم إلا منافق فمن أحبهم أحبه الله ومن أبغضهم أبغضه الله. So he's a Shia, he's a son Shi'i, but this here contradicts his beliefs, because all the Shias obviously, and this is the exact same narration which Imam, the exact same meaning of this Imam Muslim is narrating with regards to Ali radiallahu anhu, and therefore Imam Bukhari rahimahullah deemed it suitable to narrate from him. As for the Hanafi view, So the first view which we mentioned is that you have those who regard it as not permissible to narrate from any innovator. That's very similar to Imam Malik rahimahullah. Amongst those who held that view was Alama Sarakhsi rahimahullah, because he said, وَأَمَّا صَاحِبُ الْهَوَى فَقَدْ بَيَّنَّا أَنَّ الصَّحِيحَ أَنَّهُ لَا تُعْتَمَدُ رِوَايَةُ فِي أَحْكَامِ الدِّينِ. So you see, he's saying that we cannot accept his narrations when it's in ahkam. And then even فأما في أخبار الدين فيتوهم بهذا التعصب لإفساد طريق الحق على من هو محق حتى يجيبه إلى ما يدعو إليه من الباطل. So this here is the first view within the Hanafi madhab. Then Alama Ibn al-Hanbali didn't mention this view. So now coming to the views which Alama Ibn al-Hanbali mentioned in Qafwa al-Athar. The first is that if it leads to kufr, that first type which we mentioned 2 sessions back, then the narration will not be accepted. So Ibn al-Hanbali says that وَعِنْدَنَا إِنْ أَدَّتْ إِلَى الْكُفْرِ لَمْ تُقْبَلْ رِوَايَةُ صَاحِبِهَا وِفَاقًا لِأَكْثَرِ الْأُصُولِيِّينَ. So in that case, if it confirms if it leads to kufr or takes you to the brink of kufr, then obviously we will not accept that narration. وَإِنْ أَدَّتْ إِلَى الْفِسْقِ, but if it's only minor and does not lead to kufr, then he's saying, now he presents 2 different views here. And he says, فَقِيلَ قُبِلَتْ رِوَايَةُ صَاحِبِهَا إِذَا كَانَ عَدْلًا ثِقَةً غَيْرَ دَاعِيَةً. He's saying that it will be accepted if the person is honest and he does not propagate. So that's the one view which he mentions. And the second one is إِذَا كَانَ فِسْقُهُ مَظْنُونًا أَوْ مَقْطُوعًا بِهِ وَلَمْ يَتَدَيَّنِ الْكَذِبِ. So this here is the second view. So Ibn al-Hanbali is basically mentioning 2 views with regards to the innovations of a person who, that leads only to fisq. The first is that if the person is reliable and he does not propagate, then his narrations will be accepted. So in Al-Far'u al-Ḥadīth, he elaborates and he explains this here and he says, وَنَسَبَهُ صَاحِبُ التَّحْقِيقِ إِلَى عَامَّةِ أَهْلِ الْفِقْهِ وَالْحَدِيثِ وَعَلَى هَذَا الْقَوْلِ لَا يَقْبَلُ الْعَدْلُ الثِّقَةِ إِذَا كَانَ دَاعِيَةً سواء دعا إلى بدعة بذلك الحديث أم لا، لأنه لا يؤمن مع دعوته إليها أن يضع الأحاديث على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بما يوافقها. Because if he's propagating, then obviously he could be led on to fabricate ahadith and attribute them to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. فيورث ذلك تهمة في روايته أي حديث كان. So that then causes us to doubt each and every narration of his. So that's the first view which he mentions. And with this explanation, it's exactly the same what Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned, that he should not propagate his views. And you can see he's also saying that he should not, it should not be something which supports his views. Then he mentions the second is that if his fisq is doubtful, then it will be accepted. Here in Al-Far'u al-Ḥadīth, he explains what he means by doubtful. So he says, كَفِسْقِ أَهْلِ مَتْرُوكِ التَّسْمِيَةِ عَمَدًا, like the fisq of those who leave out saying the name of Allah Ta'ala when slaughtering intentionally. Or وَلَاعِبُ الشَّطْرَنْجِ عِنْدَمَا يُحَرِّمُهَا, or maybe he plays with shatranj, maybe he plays chess and these kind of games which are prohibited. And now these do not fall under innovation. Here we are talking of bid'ah, of innovation. These fall under the category of fisq, which was mentioned earlier in number 5, clause 5. So unless here we assume that the person is doing it inadan, then we can maybe probably put it here. Otherwise, it will not be correct, these examples. So when we speak about fisq and innovation, then we are referring to a person who regards something to be part of deen, while there is absolutely no basis for it. But it's not such that the person becomes a kafir. So therefore, this example might not be correct. And therefore, we look at the examples which Ibn Hajar rahimahullah himself gave in Hudassari. He said, al-mufassiq li'annahu biha كبدع الخوارج والروافض الذين لا يغلون ذلك الغلو. You see, he's giving the bid'ah of the Khawarij and the Rawafid. Because with Matruk Tasmiya Amiran, you could give the example of Shafi'is also. So this here is the second view which is mentioned. And this view is that, so the number 1 is that it's male, and thereafter he says that it should be such that the person does not regard it as permissible to lie. But Ibn al-Hanbali rahmallah prefers the first view. He says, وَالْمُخْتَارُ هُوَ الْأَوَّلِ. And with regards to the second view, there were also many scholars who accepted it. Like Allama Ismandi, rahmallah, he attributed it to majority of the ulama. So in Mizan في أصول الفقه said وأما الفسق بالتأويل فهو الفسق في الاعتقادات إذا كان فاعله متحرجا في أفعاله. They said فبعضهم يمنع قبول الرواية وعند عامة الفقهاء لا يمنع. You can see saying that according to most scholars it will not be rejected. And from the later scholars, Allama Ibn al-Hammam rahmallah followed this. So you can just keep this in mind with regards to Hanafis, that as long as the person was reliable, and many times when he did not propagate his views, they will accept it. And at times, even if he propagated because of this a second camp, then or two they would accept his narrations. Inshallah, we will continue on Saturday. Until then, Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.